The November 2020 ceasefire that followed the Karabakh war between Armenia and Azerbaijan has fueled political unrest. Mass rallies across Armenia call for the resignation of the Armenian Prime Minister as well as the head of the Karabakh administration. The country is in disarray. To make sense of domestic developments, we talked to a member of the Armenian Diaspora, George Meneshian. Mr. Meneshian is a political consultant and a postgraduate student at the University of St. Andrews. Mr. Meneshian, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
The Armenian opposition is calling for elections and a special tribunal for the country's leadership. Is this the solution to restoring normality in Armenia?
Well, first of all, let's say that 2 days ago, the Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan announced a snap election for June 20. In my point of view, this seems to be the right thing to do because I believe elections will de-escalate the political crisis in Armenia. Prime Minister Pashinyan, I think that he should have done it following the defeat in Nagorno-Karabakh. And I think that most analysts would agree on that. Now, according to a survey taken by the International Republican Institute last February, the majority of Armenians already then wanted the elections. However, as Richard Yeragosyan, director of the Regional Study Center think tank in Yerevan, Armenia, said that snap elections are a necessary step to address the political deadlock, but they may not resolve the real problems of the Armenian Republic. And such problems are the lack of accountability, corruption, and above all, in my point of view, the low legitimacy of the parliament. And because according to the aforementioned survey, just 32% of citizens have a good opinion of the National Assembly of Armenia. Nevertheless, Pashinyan's strong popular base did not want early elections. So for that reason, there are fears that the political crisis may be exacerbated after the elections, given that Pashinyan will probably gain the plurality of the voters, of the votes. According to opinion polls, almost 35% of Armenians will probably vote for Pashinyan's My Step electoral coalition, while the opposition parties, the opposing parties may gain less than 15% of the vote according to opinion polls. And almost 40% will vote for no one. Therefore, Pashinyan will probably win these elections, but he will continue having a legitimacy deficit. And I think that the fanaticized opposition will make things for him more and more difficult in parliament and of course on the streets. Now, regarding the special tribunal you mentioned, this is something the opposition parties seek. Let me tell you about a little history, a small story. In 2018, Pashinyan rose as the leader of the so-called Velvet Revolution and managed to peacefully overthrow Serge Sarkisyan and eventually become Prime Minister of Armenia by winning 70.4% of the vote. Back then, everyone expected Pashinyan's government to start a special tribunal for the representatives of the former regime, which was accused of being corrupt and authoritarian. Hence, former President Robert Kocharyan and former Lieutenant General Manvel Giragosyan were arrested. However, Pashinyan did not succeed in serving justice because Giragosyan died from COVID-19 last November, and Robert Kocharyan was released on bail, and no other representative of the old regime was convicted. My point is that it is very difficult to hold a special tribunal because of lack of legal evidence, and most importantly, because the society is deeply divided. So special tribunals will not help to resolving the crisis.
From what you describe, in Yerevan, there seems to be disenchantment with both the government and the parties of the opposition, who are presumably seen as old guard. So between Washington and Moscow, is the diaspora as politically diverse as public opinion at home? What is it that you can tell us about so-called diaspora politics?
Well, indeed, there is a strong polarization in Armenia right now. As you said, most opposition parties are pro-Moscow. Pashinyan and in his once partner, now rival, Bright Armenia Party, on the other hand, as well as former President Levon Bedrosyan and his supporters, are seen as pro-Western in a sense. Pro-Moscow politicians overlook the need for the rule of law, and they rather focus on national security, while pro-Westerners usually concentrate on the transition to a full democracy, human rights, and of course, the rule of law. Now, Pashinyan, when he rose to power and became Prime Minister of Armenia, he tried to implement some reforms, and he also tried to approach the West, but he failed. But diaspora politics are different. And with the exception of the Armenians in Russia, Armenian communities worldwide do not wish to play the Washington versus Moscow game. But things, of course, were different during the Cold War because, as you know, Armenia was part of the Soviet Union, and the prominent diaspora party, the nationalist Armenian Revolutionary Federation, was anti-communist, and it sought to liberate Armenia for Soviet occupation. But things today are different. We could say that Armenians in the West despise Russian politics or Russian lifestyle, and they have embraced the Western way of thinking. But their main priority is to support Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. And one of their fundamental goals, I would say, is the international recognition of the horrendous Armenian genocide of 1915, which was, of course, the first genocide of the 20th century. So they work on it by raising funds, for instance, by lobbying, mainly in the United States, by pressuring governments, and of course, by promoting the Armenian cause. And actually, Turkey and Azerbaijan call it as Armenian propaganda, the promoting of the Armenian cause. So it is very politicized. What else? Oh yeah, and things of course are slightly different in the once very large Armenian communities of the Middle East, because the Middle East was one of the greatest centers of the Armenian diaspora, at least until the Syrian war, I would say. And but the authoritarian nature of Arab regimes in the Middle East made it impossible for the well-organized Middle East Armenian communities to express themselves freely. They are considered, however, as the most patriotic. And this is why most of the Armenian volunteers in Nagorno-Karabakh, they came from the Middle East, and especially from Syria and Lebanon. But Lebanon, I would say, is a different case because it's a hybrid regime. It is not ruled by one person or one party. And in Lebanon, the Armenian community is very strong, politically speaking. The community is represented in parliament and in the Council of Ministers as well. And I think that this is one of the main reasons that Lebanon had already recognized Armenian genocide in 1997. So I wouldn't say that Armenians in the diaspora politics are focused on the Russia versus the West.
Mm-hmm. As things stand, what are the chances of a military coup?
Well, I think everyone agrees at this point that there are nearly no chances of a military coup in Armenia today. And the main reasons for that is the geopolitical conditions in Transcaucasia, because a military coup would lead to civil strife, and that would be catastrophic for Armenia, given the situation with Turkey and Azerbaijan. So it is a fact that Armenians respect the military forces, and they see the military forces as the members of the military forces as heroes, but they wouldn't be happy if colonels or generals ran the country. Besides, a large number of Armenians, including members of the opposition, they share democratic values. So they wouldn't agree to a military coup.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Armenian geography. So the question is, do you think that Armenian geography is really the sole determinant of its foreign policy? I mean, can you see France and the United States, for example, playing a more prominent role in the future?
Well, it is a fact that Armenian geography has tragically shaped its history, the history of Armenia, and it's certainly the main determinant for the Armenian foreign policy. We should not forget that Armenia is a landlocked country, and it is blocked by Turkey and Azerbaijan. There is an active blockade. Moreover, the country's partnership with the Russians contributed to the cold relations between Armenia and Georgia. So today, Georgia has effectively cut off the corridor that connects Armenia to the Russian Federation. And this is the main reason for Armenia's special relationship with Iran. Because today, Iran is of vital importance for the economic survival of the Republic of Armenia. However, Yerevan is traditionally maintaining close ties with Western states as well. And France and Greece are some notable examples. Now, regarding the USA, the Armenian lobby, which is quite strong, has managed to build alliances with senators, House representatives, and governors. The State Department, however, maintains a more neutral stance towards the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict, because Azerbaijan is important for its oil and gas revenues, for its role in the war against terrorism, And of course, it is important as a potential ally against Iran. So, geostrategically speaking, I think that today the US and France lost in the recent Nagorno-Karabakh case, because despite their membership in the OSCE Minsk group, they played virtually no role in the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war. And the reason is that in the United States, they had the presidential election, while in France, Macron's presidency was essentially challenged by the consequences of the pandemic, but mainly by the terrorist attacks in October. Russia, on the contrary, has emerged once more as the main actor in Nagorno-Karabakh. And today, it is the only member of the OSCE Minsk group that has deployed military personnel in the region. Russia, moreover, Russia was the sole mediator for the November agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And it's the only power alongside Turkey that oversees the ceasefire in the region, the ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh. So for time being, I think that there seems to be no way for France and the US to be part of the solution. They may, however, play a more active and proactive role in humanitarian assistance and perhaps in confidence building between the two warring parties.
Mm-hmm. This was exactly what I was going to ask you just now. I mean, do you see any scope for conflict transformation or any sort of confidence building measures? Can you see, in effect, a situation in which Armenia will break from its geopolitical isolation?
Well, of course, time will have to pass to see such developments, because the Armenian society is traumatized by the great losses of the war. But there is always hope. And I think that the corridor that will connect mainland Azerbaijan with its enclave of Nakhichevan, passing through southern Armenia, as well as the railway that will connect Armenia and Russia through Azerbaijan, will be two giant steps forward if they materialized. There are, however, many obstacles for confidence building, such as the destruction of Armenian religious sites that recently occurred in Shusha. The Green Chapel was destroyed in the town, or the situation with the prisoners of war, and two sides accuse each other of abusing the rights of the captives, etc. But I think that the two countries must start thinking about their next moves following the end of the 5-year period foreseen in the November 10 agreement. Thus, a new dialogue must start for the final determination of the status of Nagorno-Karabakh. We must not return to a frozen conflict, because there is a danger that a frozen conflict might evolve into a full-scale war in the future, as has already happened in autumn. I mean, we had a frozen conflict for 25 years, and suddenly the region faced another bloody war between the two nations. And I would say that this dialogue would stand a better chance for success if it was supervised by an important international organization rather than Russia alone. Of course, Russia should participate in the process, but I think that the dialogue must be, for instance, UN-led a UN-led dialogue or an OSCE-led dialogue. And you spoke about isolation, Armenia's isolation. Unfortunately or fortunately, Armenia must seek the final resolution of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict in order to break its isolation. As a poor, landlocked country with no resources, Armenia needs her neighbors to thrive, but she herself is also important for her neighbors. So courageous steps must be taken by all sides. One example is that Armenia must finally openly recognize the existing borders with its neighbors. Turkey, on the other hand, must finally recognize the Armenian genocide. And Azerbaijan, of course, must secure the safety, the rights, and the prosperity of the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh and their heritage. So as a first step, Armenia and Azerbaijan must stop immediately demonizing each other. And I think that people-to-people contact and interaction in general must be encouraged, because this is the first step towards peaceful coexistence in the region. Because the fact is that both sides have suffered immensely from this conflict. So they better stop talking about which side suffered the most, because I think that it does not matter now which side suffered the most. And I will give you some examples of anti-Armenianism in Azerbaijan, for instance, is deeply rooted. For instance, I'm Greek. I'm a Greek citizen, a European citizen, and I'm of Armenian ancestry on my father's side. But I cannot travel to Azerbaijan because of my surname ending with Yan. So this has to stop now, because this is why the two nations are demonizing each other. And the Aliyev regime in Baku, and whoever holds the prime minister's office in Yerevan, it's Nikol Pashinyan or someone else in the future, they must ignore the political costs, and they have to open new channels of communication with the other side, because it is only then, I think, yes, because only then a sincere dialogue will start between the two nations, and only then their relations will become eventually normalized. And most importantly, a new war will be avoided, because wars are catastrophic, and today in Armenia the situation is so bad. I mean, it's the first time that the country is close to a civil war, a kind of civil war. But I'm optimistic, and I think that they will address the challenges, and the elections next June will help to de-escalate this crisis, and in order to start to plan the future. And the new administration in Yerevan must at last carefully examine what Armenia should do following the 5 years that the agreement foresees.
Let's hope that the crisis does de-escalate. Mr. Meneshian, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.